the real game changer is conversational AI, to be honest, because that's something that just did not exist before, that humans could not do.
All right, everybody, we are back again, and today we are talking to Karine. And according to her LinkedIn, nobody loves surveys as much as she does. So we're going to talk everything market research, surveys, insights. It's going to be a great time. Karine, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd love to start out and just get to know a little bit about you. So can you tell us kind of what your professional background is? And then it looks like recently you actually kind of made a switch and you're doing something new called Research Heads. So we'd love to learn about what you were doing before and what you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. So I've always been in research. The type of person who knew what I wanted to do. A lot of people in market research said they fell into it. I didn't. That's what I wanted to do. So before the Research Heads, I was at 2CV, which is a market research full service company. And I was responsible for quant side projects end-to-end, and mostly in the tech and entertainment sectors, being in San Francisco. So at the end there at 2CV, I was there for almost 15 years, which might feel like a lifetime. But when you work in consulting, it doesn't feel this way because you always work on different projects, different topics, different clients. So it feels always very different. You don't get bored. And I was the co-head of the US office, which, sounds like a fancy management sort of title. But at the end of the day, I really like getting into the weeds, and I'm always super hands-on on projects. So that's why I got into the business, to do research, not to do management. So fast forward to January. And two of my former colleagues and I have decided to start our own agency. It's a quantitative agency. But the reason we wanted to start this is because we've identified some gaps in the market. So with all of the DIY tools out there, it seems like clients are expected to do a lot more themselves internally. But they don't necessarily want to. Maybe they don't feel like scripting a survey is really a good use of their time. Maybe they don't know everything from recruiting to reporting, or that kind of scenarios. So what we feel is that there isn't really a true do-it-yourself solutions out there for them. Either they will have to do everything on their own, or they outsource the whole project for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So what we want to offer is really more flexibility and going back to the basics and solving the real pain points that client have. So if it's an end-to-end project, that's fine. We have tons of experience and we can do that. But if all they need is moderation or reporting, we want to be able to offer that flexibility. And not always feel like we need to be chasing the segmentation or the brand tracker, right? Like, we also just love moderation if that's what they need. It's just going back to really the pain points and what end clients really need.
Got it. That gives us a ton to jump into here. Where I kind of wanted to jump off, and this is probably perfect given your current role at Research Heads, is I wanted to get your take on the state of market research in 2024. So when you're working with clients, well, I guess there's two questions here. One is, when you're working with clients, you mentioned they have some of these pain points. I'd love to hear about that, but also any trends or big things that are emerging in research in general that you are kind of seeing firsthand in your work.
Yeah, I think a big theme, and it's not necessarily new, but maybe because AI is making it so easy to just create summaries of data, there is an expectation to be impactful, a lot more, thoughtful, connect the dots. And I think it applies to both in-house researchers and agencies, right? Because if that's what the in-house researchers need to be more impactful, of course, this is going to trickle down to agencies who are working with them. So when I think of a successful project, that I've done, and this was a while ago, in San Francisco. I don't know if I can name the company, but it's a few years old now. Anyway, it's a clothing brand. It's a big one. They have a flagship store on Market Street. Maybe they don't anymore. I don't know. Anyway, the project was trying to figure out which signage works best in store. So looking at things like everyday low prices, last chance, like the colors of the background of the sign, the font, and everything. So what made this project so successful is that they've actually used the insights and made changes in store, like for real. So I would walk by every morning and then go see the signs that they picked, for whatever. And that made it, that to me was, oh, that's the end of the project. And that's a little different from how we think about things now, at least on the agency side, because often we think, okay, the report is delivered, therefore that's the end of the project. But that's not how it works, right? Like, end clients might be working with this data for like a year. So I think what we're trying to do at Research Heads is also focusing more on socializing, on supporting the clients in that last mile. That is usually just like, okay, bye, we're done. And the way that I think about this is a bit like content creation. And I think we've had some discussions on LinkedIn. I don't know if you've seen them, but where some people have talked about market researchers being more like content creators. And I think this makes total sense because stakeholders are people, and people love bite-sized information. They love the information that they can like connect with and feel more, emotional. And they like it that it's curated, that they don't have to go through like hundreds of slides. So I think this is like a super important, like when we go back to how to be impactful, is being able to think more like that, to be like, okay, well, if I wanted to just kind of have one idea and that's the message I'm trying to support, and I'm thinking about it like I'm designing a carousel for LinkedIn, and I have to curate the information, I know there's like 50 things I want to say, but I can't. I love this quote, but maybe not today. Maybe I'll just park it there and I'll go back to it. But really just being kind of focused. And I think being able to offer this sort of research deliverables to end client is going to be super useful for them.
That is a very prominent theme that I've heard in some recent conversations, and I have seen, especially on LinkedIn, people talking about this. It's also really relevant to what we're doing at
Mhm.
Reveal AI, which is we're trying to think about how do we either summarize or package or visualize data in a way that is not just creating more work for the end client, basically. So
Mhm.
to your point about saying traditionally maybe the handoff has sort of been, hey, here's this research report. It's a million pages long. Have fun with that. See you later. Um, while there's definitely a lot of value in that report, right? The people who are receiving it are maybe saying, okay, so now I have all this work to do of going through here and figuring out how to
Mhm.
translate this into actions within my business. And that at its core is what we're trying to effectuate. We're trying to produce the insights that create action that creates positive business outcomes. So your point about packaging and kind of reformatting that information into a way that it's more consumable, I think is absolutely critical. I can't remember who coined this, but it's kind of like a catchy little thing I've seen on LinkedIn, which is it's like market research and then like the handshake emoji and then marketing your research, and that's like those two things.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
it's like the happy the happy couple or whatever. It's like you have the great research insights, and then you need to produce them in a way that they're actually going to be consumed. Um, so I'm wondering, do you have any other insights into what that might look like, or anything special that you're doing at Research Heads in terms of how you kind of produce deliverables or anything like that?
Well, I think the key is really collaboration with the end clients, because As much as we would want to, we don't know the business as much as they do. They live and breathe every day the business. So we have research objectives, right? And if we're lucky, we might get business objectives. But I think with the step that's often missing is, okay, there's the debrief where you're going through all these slides, and then it's like, okay, bye. But I think that's kind of like where the last phase of the project starts. You need to actually sit down with your client and be like, okay, well, now that you've had time to digest all this, what are the key takeaway for you? And then we can help create these bite-sized slide deck or infographics that will be just more digestible for stakeholders as well.
I think that's really well said because at the end of the day, it comes down to the particular needs of the business that you're working with. And
Hmm.
so what the deliverables are going to look like, yeah, it should depend and sort of be relevant and customized to their needs. One thing that I heard you say is if you're lucky, you also get the business objectives, right?
Hmm.
So usually you go in, you definitely have research objectives, uh, but having the business objectives in mind, I think, is something really key for folks in research roles. So I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about how easy or hard is it to work with the business to understand those underlying objectives, and what kind of difference does it make for you as a researcher when you can really understand and internalize the problems the business is trying to solve, or really the actions they're trying to take on the other side of the research? How does that maybe change your process along the way?
Well, so I have an example of this. A few years ago, I was working on consumer electronics research, and there was both a qualitative part to it and a quantitative part to it. And the quant people don't get to leave their house that often, unfortunately. Usually, sometimes the qual is done first, and we might look at the transcript, we might look at the videos, but we're not necessarily there in the room. So for that project, it was in Africa, in Nigeria. So I was really lucky because I got to tag along with the qualitative team, but also with the stakeholders. So the research person, but the sales people as well, who commissioned the research. So we spent like a week together going through consumer, those markets in Nigeria. They did the one-on-one interviews, the ethnographies, and all of that. And we got to talk a lot about what did we hear and how this is going to be impactful, for the business. And at the end of that week, I kind of realized, okay, well, I have like these 20 the research objectives, but really those are like the three things that we're trying to solve. Like those are the real questions that they have. And so what I did as a result of that is the questionnaire, I mean, I made sure the questionnaire addressed that, but the report was structured in a completely different way. It wasn't like, oh, first people, that there's the trigger, and then there's the touch points, and then they're choosing this and that. Like, no, it wasn't structured like that. It was structured around the three business questions that they had, so that they've like, all they had to do is like, oh yeah, that's my business question. I'm going to read through like these 20 slides and I will have an answer and I will know what to do about it. But everything is so project specific. If you have worked with a client for a very long time, then you kind of get a sense of that. If it's a new relationship, then I think you need to invest more time trying to understand really what they're trying to do, not just with this piece of research, but just like in general, and sure, like some of that is from talking to the end clients, but it also just go on the internet and figure out what this company is doing, to make sure that you have all this information before going into it.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's a theme that keeps coming up over and over when I talk to folks, not just in market research, but folks who are doing, customer research, sales research, things like this. And uh, it seems like there's two really crucial times to understand the business objectives. One is when you're trying to win new business. So not saying,
Mhm.
hey, here's some research for the sake of research. It's no, here's the business problems that we're going to help you solve, and we're going to do it through research. And then when you're actually conducting the research, saying, again, hey, this isn't just a 50-page report on some nice
Mhm,
findings. This is, like you said, 20 slides that are solving your specific business problem, right? And so I
mhm,
think that having both of those things at play, it really helps create that buy-in and really connect the results of the research to what it can do for the
mhm,
business. So this is, yeah, something that I keep hearing again and again. So one direction I wanted to go as we talk about the state of market research um, is kind of participant experience.
mhm,
So I've seen some posts from you on LinkedIn about it's kind of the dual elements of participant experience and data quality. So I was wondering if you could speak to maybe first starting with participant experience when it comes to quant or qual surveys. If there's what you're seeing kind of in the industry generally, any thoughts to share there?
mhm. Yeah, it's really difficult to separate participant experience from data quality, because it just goes together. But just let me kind of walk you through sort of my journey here, how I got into this rabbit hole. Um, it wasn't planned, it was sort of accidental. I was on Twitter, I saw an ad for paid surveys, so I just signed up for a few panels and I started taking surveys for like an hour a day. I enjoy taking surveys. Then I started kind of understanding more the participant experience. And I realized just a few months ago that one of the panels that I'm on had some very detailed activity summary. So I could see exactly the surveys where I screened out and how much points I earned there, and then the one that completed and everything. So being a researcher, put all that in Excel and try to figure out like what are the stats here. So basically the panelist experience is not great because they screen out a lot. I screened out about 70% of the time that I've taken surveys. So that's 178 survey that like 260 survey attempts, 178 surveys where I screened out. And when you screen out, you don't earn a lot of money because it's like a point here, 4 points. Like points are like pennies, basically. So that's not a very good use of your time. And then even when you do manage to qualify for the study, you obviously the incentives are very low. So on average, when I crunched all the numbers, I made 72 cents per hour per hour doing this. So when you compare to a qualitative incentive, where for 1 hour focus group or IDIs, whatever, it's like at least $100 an hour that we would pay participants to do this. But it's the same person, right? It's the same hour. So on the quant side, we're like, here's 70 cents. And then on the qual side, you're like, here's $100. So basically, like what this creates is a system where the only way you can be successful is if you understand how you qualify for studies. So you don't screen out 70% of the time. And you attempt a lot of surveys and you complete a lot of surveys, and then it becomes a volume game, because that's the only way that it will add up. 50 cents here and there will add up if you spend 10 hours a day doing this. So we've kind of created this system that favors fraudsters and professional respondents, because they're the only people who can be successful at this. And then that's the segue sort of like into data quality. Like, well, what do you think that does to the data? Well, you have a lot of people in the system who just don't care, right? Who just have that intent. And, our response to data quality is, well, let's build a bigger army. Let's have fraud detection software, and let's have like these 20 QC checks in the survey, and let's check open ends. And you need to do all of this, but it's not solving the root cause of the problem, right? It's just kind of a band-aid solution to try to make this better, basically. So this is kind of like the picture of what it is today, but changing that will take a lot of investment, increasing the incentives, improving the technology so people don't keep screening out so much. They don't spend, 20 minutes kind of just spinning around the system trying to qualify for a survey. None of this is going to be free or easy to do.
Yeah, so that was the next place I wanted to go, which was what you think the solutions are here. You touched on it a bit, which is basically better pay, better tech. But I'm wondering if we can go a little bit deeper on that. So the glaringly obvious thing to me, based on what you said, is that there's a huge disconnect between, quant and qual when it comes to how much participants are paid. And I'm wondering if you see sort of like a new emerging paradigm where we have to have some new mode of surveying folks where we're doing more qual at scale. So maybe the participant pay comes down because I don't know, you're talking to AI or you're talking to you're doing
Mhm.
remote focus groups. I'm not sure, um, but it seems like with the current paradigm in quant, the incentives are very poor for the participant. So you're going to get poor data quality, you're going to get fraud. And so I feel like companies should be looking at this and saying, this isn't a great place to go if we want really rich, audience and customer data to inform our business strategy. So then on the other side, you have qual, which is you're probably getting a lot deeper insights, but you're having to pay really a premium for that, right?
Mhm.
So my question is, do you see maybe some sort of middle ground that's emerging where companies might be doing qual at scale with new technology solutions? Do you think that we just need to get our act together and change the incentives on the quant side? Like, how do you think this evolves over the next, call it, 3 to 5 years?
Gosh, I don't. It's a tough question because it took us what 15 years to get here. I don't know if we can fix it in 3 years, to be honest. But I think one thing that we'll realize is, so like back in the day when we were doing Katie interviews, nobody was like, I need 2,000 ketchup buyers. Like you had to get them on the phone. You had like the surveys were. I mean, there was a fewer questions but a longer interview, I guess, because you had people on the phone. But I think the way I think about this is when we went from Katie to online, things that changed, right? Like all of a sudden it was cheaper, so you could do more interviews, your sample sizes started being bigger, the questionnaire started being longer. And I think when we think about how we're going to just like have to adjust, I guess. Like if now the mindset is we need to care more about the participant experience because that will get us better data, then I think maybe we do need to go back to smaller sample sizes because it will cost more money. So, so it's going to be more about quantity or about quality over quantity. And this is all kind of organically going to change. And then one thing that we'll realize is when you have people that are like not professional survey takers or they're not fraudsters, their patience for surveys is much lower than you think. Like if you are not in the mindset of doing a survey, well, you can't really do a 20 minutes long survey. Like you're going to get a really high drop off among non-professional respondent. So like progressively, I think we might realize, oh, this is not going to work anymore. Just like the Katie interview doesn't work anymore on online. You don't need to have this super long question that says, select blah, 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 where one is not at all likely and five is very likely. Like we changed that because we realized the scale is labeled. So you don't need it. So, I mean, some of it will be conscious and then some of it will just be like, trial and error and realize like this is a new sample, this is a new type of, you think it's the same research because it's still online, but now this is different, different people, different expectation, different incentive, and things will change, without us like really doing anything. It's just gonna have to evolve.
Yeah. One question this brings up for me, and I'm curious to get your take here, is do you think that we lost anything in our search to go kind of broader and operate at a larger scale when it comes to research? And I know you have the quant background, and so like kind of name of the game is, hey, we can do this at scale and learn things from these large samples. Uh, but I think my personal view is that with the rise of the internet, we basically said, oh, we can now connect with billions and billions of people worldwide. And then the need to operate at that scale, I think it kind of determined and narrowed the tools that we develop for the job, because we say, hey, we need
Hmm.
something that 50,000 people can respond to, right? We need to be able to measure and analyze that quickly. And so obviously, you're not going to do 50,000 one-on-one conversations. So I'm wondering if, I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is we might be, I don't know if coming full circle is the right term, but coming back to a world of actually smaller sample sizes, maybe a little more in-depth research. I'm just curious to
Hmm.
get your take on that. If you think the pendulum almost swung like too far in the direction of scale, and it's starting to swing back a bit. Like, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think online research really became the default for everything, and that is kind of sad. I've done face-to-face research in India, and we say like panels will be skewed a little bit because it's more urban, it's more educated. If you think about a country like India, that is true. They're also more tech savvy on these panels, but there's still nothing like going to Mumbai and walking down the street with an interviewer knocking on doors to really understand how people live, And when you look at this data set and you've collected, I think I did 8,000 face-to-face interview in India. I was really connecting which each responded, like which each row. I was like, yeah, totally get this. I was in that city, and this person, I've only talked to this person, and now I have like 200 people, but that one person was really representative. I could totally see their lifestyle, their decisions, and everything. But doing that kind of research is really expensive, and it takes a long time. So obviously the default went to, oh, we can do this online. Everybody's online. Let's do that. And it has pros and cons, right? Like, yes, you can do it fast and everything, but there's nothing like being there. And I think that's why it's still so important to have qual whenever the scope of the project allows for it, to do interviews, to do focus group, to still get kind of that perspective and complement the quant data.
That's very well said. And the idea of doing 8,000 face-to-face interviews, that's might have to ask you about that another time, because that sounds intense, but also
Yeah,
really, really cool.
yeah,
Um, so this kind of leads me into the next topic I wanted to touch on, which is the role of AI in market research. I think the way I initially got connected with you was I saw your post about using GPT to, I think, validate survey, like open-ended survey data.
yeah.
So I think where this conversation could go is, does AI have a role in helping to do more qualitative research at scale, or helping you make sense of qualitative data at scale? But where I actually wanted to start was, can you tell me about the experiments that you've done using GPT to analyze and kind of assess the quality of survey open ends? I'd love to use your experiment as kind of a jumping off point for this topic.
Yeah, so back when GPT like rolled out, I guess in November 2022, everybody was super excited. I was excited because it's something that can understand context, and that's one thing that was missing from the tools that we had at the time to assess the quality of open ends. Is that they were more focused on the obvious things like gibberish, profanity, copy and paste, that sort of things, but it still wouldn't flag responses that don't answer the question, right? If it was like a perfect open end, but it just was out of context and not answering the question, it wouldn't flag that. So researchers go, read like thousands of open ends, and I actually really enjoy reading open ends because, okay, there's like the mindset of, okay, we need to clean the data, but also you learn a lot from reading people's comment. So I don't mind doing this, but having a little help, might be useful. So I thought, okay, well, that GPT is the perfect tool for this. So I designed this. Well, I worked with a software developer. I'm sort of like the product manager in this situation. I have requirements. I test it, like I fine tune the model, but I'm not the one actually writing the code. So it actually worked really well. Where the prompt was like, you're a market researcher. You're trying to figure out if this open end answers the question, answer question, does it answer it, yes or no? And then you provide maybe 30, 50 open end responses to train the model, and then it codes the rest into yes, it does, yes, no, it doesn't. So nowadays, a year later, whatever, there are some tools that do that for real, not just me trying to hack into the, OpenAI APIs here. But what I have realized is that you have to be careful with these AI tools, because the training data is everything. If the outcome is only going to be as good as the training data that you provide. And what I've realized with this experiment is that humans are more lenient when they assess open-ended responses. Sometimes, yeah, it doesn't exactly answer the question, but you can tell this person is actually a real person. They're not like a bot, or they're not, they went down a different path, like a path that you had not provided in the training data. So GPT would be like, nope, does not answer the question, when in fact it does. So you still can't be, and whether it's my tool or some other tool, I'm still very skeptical that, you can just let the whole thing code for you without having any input or reviewing this yourself. Because the last thing you want to do is start rejecting legitimate respondent because the model is just not good enough.
I think that speaks to a larger theme that we're seeing in AI generally, but certainly within the research space, which is AI is it's like your very well-meaning but kind of limited assistant. So it's trying really hard
Mm-hmm.
to do a great job, but you as the expert, or the manager of your assistant,
Mm-hmm.
still need to be in the driver's seat, right? So you're looking at the results of the work, spot checking, saying, "Oh, actually, we shouldn't have thrown this response out." And I think you're totally right that, especially when it comes to qualitative research, it's not something that you can just fully hand off to a robot and expect it
Mm-hmm.
to do a great job, because at the end of the day, qualitative research, it's a very human endeavor, right? We're really trying to understand the why and the deeper kind of motivations of these research participants, and that's an incredibly human thing, right? And so I don't
Mm-hmm.
expect my robot assistant to be at 100% with that. But to your point, I think it can massively accelerate that process. I think it can massively augment
Mm-hmm.
researchers in their roles. And so it sounds like you were able to have some really, if I remember the post right, it's you had dozens and dozens or maybe hundreds of open ends, and you said, "Hey, for about $6, I was able to more or
Yeah,
less, uh, you know,
exactly. Yeah.
validate these answers." So that, I mean, that's a huge upgrade for market researchers, right? And I think it just comes with the asterisk that, hey, results are not 100% guaranteed. You still need to have the human in the loop. So what I'd like to hear from you to build on that is, where else do you see AI adding value? Or if you want to take it another direction, where are you convinced that it's not going to add value anytime soon? Or where are you most skeptical? I'm happy to hear both sides of it, because I think you're in a really unique position where you've been in the research industry for 15 plus years, but you're also very interested in AI. So you're kind of the perfect person to ask this question to.
I think the real game changer is conversational AI, to be honest, because that's something that just did not exist before, that humans could not do. So you have a lot of AI assisted tools nowadays that, like you said, will help you, be faster at it. For example, you still need to check, but in theory, like coding tools, for example, okay, or even summaries. Okay, well, at the end of the day, you can still have a human do it. We have that skill. conversational AI is like completely different. In a survey, to have the ability to kind of respond to the respondent in real time with a response that makes sense, and a follow-up that makes sense, that's completely new. So I think there's a lot that that we can do with this. I think the challenge again, and I don't want to go back into the data quality rabbit hole here, but it becomes very obvious with qual at scale if your sample is not good, if your respondents are fraudsters or bots or not engaged. So I think as we develop more of these qual at scale type of solution, that will also force us to think about the participant experience and like data quality.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Do you and so I'm not asking you to predict the future here, and don't want to put you on the spot too much, but if you just had to imagine a vision for how specifically the participant experience for qualitative research could change and evolve and upgrade in the coming years, what does that look like? Because in the limited sense, what you can imagine is, hey, we have our same survey platform, but now the open ends are conversational, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's already like pretty sweet, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like such a huge unlock to have this, conversational AI technology that the participant experience could evolve in new and kind of novel ways. And so, do you have, again, not to put you on the spot too much, but do you have a vision for what kind of the next generation of qualitative research in an online setting could look like?
Well, I think the future is more hybrid, so I think there will still be quant surveys with no conversational AI, just kind of like your regular survey. And then you're always going to have qual with actual moderator. I don't think that conversational AI is going to replace the role of a moderator, of ethnographies, of like, focus group, having that group dynamic of like the one-on-one connection that you have with participants. I think it's like a third thing, right? It's like
Mm,
hybrid methodologies become a third thing, basically, where you can kind of augment the quant with some qualitative features, but it doesn't replace a whole qualitative project.
got it. Um, yeah, I'm super interested to see how this space evolves. I think your way of capturing it, which is it's not quant and it's not in person qual, it's a secret third thing. That's a,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good way to put it. I'll have to remember that one. Um, so I know we're coming up on time here, so I just have two quick kind of rapid fire questions for you, and then we'll wrap. If you had to give advice to folks in the market research space in 2024, I guess what sort of general advice do you have for especially market researchers or research firms who are trying to grow their business, uh, deliver better results, move faster, be more efficient, anything in the realm of being a better market researcher? What advice do you have for folks?
I think still focusing on quality over quantity, you just can't go wrong with this. Especially if you have limited budget, limited resources, focusing on just better design research, better sample, will get you better results at the end. It's really just focusing more on doing fewer things right, I think, than just trying to spread yourself too thin.
I think that is timeless advice, and if you substitute market researcher or research firm with essentially any other role, that advice is gonna hold true. So very well said. And then last question I have for you is just where can we find you online? I know I've learned a ton from following you on LinkedIn. I'm sure a lot of folks after listening to this are going to want to learn what you're doing at Research Heads. So just give us an on ramp to how we can learn about you and your business and everything you're doing.
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best place right now because we have no website. We're just we're just starting out. So honestly, I'm very involve on LinkedIn. So that is the best place to reach me.
Perfect. So, Karine, thank you so much for your time today. It's been amazing talking to you. You brought so much to the table in terms of where the market research industry is today, where you see it going, how AI is impacting it. It's been a wonderful conversation. I just want to thank you for your time, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Thank you. This was great.